The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead as the heavy metal door slammed shut, echoing through the juvenile detention center's concrete corridors. In cell block G7, 17-year-old Dante Williams sat hunched on a thin mattress, his black hoodie pulled off despite the heat. His hands trembled, not with fear, but with adrenaline still burning from the chase that had landed him here. Outside the reinforced glass, Officer Marcus Grant watched, clipboard in hand. At 42, Grant had processed hundreds of kids through this system. Arrest, booking, paperwork. Clean, efficient, impersonal. But something about this boy made him hesitate. Dante's shoulders were squared in defiance, as if refusing to bow even as his words closed in. His eyes, sharp beneath the hood, carried both anger and something else. Something Grant recognized: intelligence, pain, a hunger to be seen. The file in Grant's hand was depressingly predictable: truancy, petty theft, disturbing the peace. His partner had shrugged him off as just another frequent flyer, another lost cause. But then Dante looked up. Their eyes met through the glass, and for a split second, time held still. In that look, Grant felt a jolt in his chest, because staring back at him wasn't just a kid in trouble, it was himself, 25 years ago. He signed the paperwork with a practice deficiency, but his pen felt heavy. He knew what he was supposed to do: finish the shift, clock out, and forget cell D7. That's what good officers did. They didn't get involved. Grant turned to leave, but the weight in his chest didn't move with him. Something told him this moment mattered, that this arrest wasn't just an ending at all. It was the beginning. When one choice can change the course of a life, would you walk away or lean in? Drop your answer in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe for more unforgettable stories of resilience and redemption. 3 hours earlier, the call had come in as routine shoplifting at Martinez's corner store. Grant and his partner Rodriguez had expected a quick bust, probably a kid shoving candy or energy drinks into a backpack. 30-minute stops. But when they pulled up, Mrs. Martinez was pacing near the entrance, her English tangled with rapid Spanish as she pointed towards the back aisle. He took the drinks and chips. When I confronted him, he just stood there, didn't run until you pulled up. Grant followed her gesture. A tall, lanky teen in a black hoodie stood boxed in between the coolers and the candy shelves. His stance was rigid, like a cornered animal. Grant's hand instinctively hovered near his belt. Calls like this could turn explosive in a heartbeat. "Easy," he said, stepping forward. "You want to tell me what happened here?" The boy, Dante Williams, snapped back with a string of profanity, accusations about being harassed, targeted, and profiled. His voice was loud, but his hands trembled as he spoke. Hunger, withdrawal, something deeper than stolen chips. Rodriguez muttered, "Lost cause." But Grant caught something else, a heaviness in Dante's eyes that didn't match his words. Not cocky, not even scared, just tired. The arrest itself was clean. No fights, no attempt to run. Handcuffs clicked. Complaints kept coming, and Rodriguez rolled his eyes as they walked him out. But the quiet ride to juvenile detention left Grant unsettled. From the driver's seat, he kept glancing in the rear-view mirror. The flashing patrol lights painted Dante's face in red and blue, making him look both older and younger at the same time. Dante stared out of the window, lips pressed tight, not smug or defiant, just resigned. "How old are you?" Grant finally asked. Old enough to know better, apparently. The bitterness stung more than the words themselves. Something in Grant shifted. 25 years ago, he had sat in the back of a car just like this, cuffed, furious, sure his life was already over. The only difference was that Officer Patricia Walker had refused to see him as a statistic. She had visited him, pushed him to finish school, even nudged him towards the badge he now wore. And now, staring at Dante in the mirror, one question pressed hard in his chest. What if no one showed up for this kid? The detention center reeked of bleach and hopelessness, fear clinging like mildew. Grant had walked these halls many times, but today wasn't about paperwork or statistics. Today was about Dante. On their first meeting, Dante slouched at the metal table, hood low, arms crossed. He barely looked up, just long enough to spit a few profanities before shutting the world out again. Grant leaned forward. "I didn't come here to lecture you," he said. Dante smirked without humor. "Then what are you doing here, cop?" For a moment, Grant thought about walking out, until he noticed the tremor in Dante's hands, the same restless shake he'd had at 17. He stayed. Maybe this wasn't a waste. Maybe there was something under all that anger. The second visit wasn't much better. No insults this time, just silence. Grant broke it. "I sat where you once sat," he said. Dante glanced up, skeptical. 17, stole a bite, thought my life was over. For the first time, Dante's mask cracked. By the third visit, something shifted. Dante was already at the table, fiddling with a battered chess set. Grant sat across from him. "You play?" he asked. Dante shrugged. "Not really, just passes time." Grant reached for the broken knight, turning it between his fingers. "This guy's been through some battles." Dante cracked a tiny laugh. The first sound that wasn't laced with bitterness, kinda like me. The moment hung fragile as glass. Grant etched it into memory. Two figures bent over a battered chessboard, a chipped knight between them, the boy's walls lowering one piece at a time. And then Dante surprised him. His voice dropped, softer than Grant had ever heard. "My mom, she doesn't even know I'm in here. She'd probably say I deserved it." Grant's throat tightened. This was the twist he hadn't expected. He had braced for anger, for more denial, not this quiet confession of loneliness. He wanted to promise Dante that things would get better, but he knew better than to lie. Instead, he said, "Sometimes people give up on us too soon. Doesn't mean we're finished." Would Dante take that in, or retreat behind the wall? Not everyone shared Grant's patience. One afternoon, back at the precinct, Rodriguez leaned against the squad car and shook his head. "You're wasting your time, man. These kids, they don't change. Our job is to arrest them and move on." Grant stared at his partner. He wanted to argue, to say Dante wasn't like the others, but wasn't that every bleeding heart cop thought right before they got burned? Rodriguez smirked. "You start playing social worker, you'll end up disappointed." The words lingered like a smoke. Was Rodriguez right? Was Grant setting himself up for failure? But every time Grant thought about walking away, he saw that broken knight on the chessboard. He remembered Officer Walker, the cop who hadn't given up on him, and he couldn't shake the thought. If she had listened to Rodriguez back then, where would he be now? The night before Dante's court hearing, Grant found himself back at the detention center. He told himself it was to drop off some paperwork, but really, it was because he couldn't let the kid face the judge without one more conversation. Dante was waiting, shoulders hunched, eyes darting like a trapped animal. "They're gonna throw the book at me, aren't they?" he muttered. Grant sat across from him, steady. "Depends." "On what?" "On whether the judge sees a lost cause." Grant leaned forward, his voice low, deliberate. "Or someone worth fighting for." The boy froze. For a moment, the bravado drained from him completely, leaving just a scared 17-year-old underneath. And Grant knew he couldn't stand by. He couldn't just be another cop filing out a report. The decision settled heavily in his chest. Tomorrow, in that courtroom, he'd speak up for Dante, risk his reputation, risk of being laughed by his own partner, risk everything, because once someone had done the same for him. Would it be enough to save Dante from the system waiting to swallow him whole? From the outside, Riverside County Family Court was just concrete and narrow windows. Inside, it was where futures bent or broke. Grant sat in the gallery, uniform pressed, badge glinting under the lights. Officially, he was there as protocol, the arresting officer at the hearing. Unofficially, he knew this was a crossroads. The air smelled of polish and floor wax, paper shuffles, echoing footsteps, the occasional cough, and an uneasy calm before the storm. At the defense table, Dante's lanky frame drowned in a borrowed shirt. His grandmother's sharply pressed khakis couldn't hide the fatigue on his young face. His hands twisted restlessly in his lap. Beside him, Public Defender David Kim flipped through files with weary detachment. Across the aisle, ADA Alexa Mitchell arranged her papers with military precision. When the bailiff called order, Judge Margaret Hale entered, authority carved into her presence. 12 years on the bench had hardened her into skepticism. She'd seen too many broken promises from both kids and cops. Mitchell rose. Her voice was crisp, clinical. Your Honor, Dante Williams has 3 prior offenses, each escalating. For his 3rd strike, the people recommended 6 months in juvenile detention followed by probation. Her words landed like stones in Grant's stomach. He glanced at Dante, head bowed, shoulders tight. It looked like less defiance and more like resignation. Kim's rebuttal was textbook. Family hardship, young age, mitigating circumstances. It wasn't enough. Grant could see it in the judge's expression, the way her eyebrows pinched, the way she leaned back in her chair as if she'd heard this argument 100 times. Grant felt the tension coil tighter. He was ready to stand, to say something, to put himself on the line if the moment came. But then, the unexpected happened. Dante stood. The scrape of his chair echoed too loudly in the quiet courtroom. His lawyer hissed at him to sit, but the boy didn't move. His voice wavered at first, but he forced it steady. Your Honor, can I say something? Judge Hale tilted her head, considering. Mr. Williams, you may speak, though I suggest you heed your counsel's advice. A ripple of murmurs crossed the courtroom. Grant's pulse quickened. What was Dante doing? The boy swallowed hard. I know you're gonna send me away. I know I messed up. And I know saying sorry doesn't mean anything anymore. But I'm not asking for me this time. He paused. The silence was thick. Everyone leaned in, waiting. I'm asking for my grandmother, he said, voice breaking just slightly. She's 74. She's sick. She's the only one who's ever been there for me. If I get locked up again, she'll blame herself. She'll think she failed me, but she didn't. I failed her. For the first time, Judge Hale's stern mask cracked. The room held its breath. Grant felt the sting behind his eyes. The kid wasn't talking about himself anymore. He was talking about the one person keeping him tethered to hope. But Dante wasn't done. He turned, and his gaze locked on Grant's. And if you don't believe me, he said, then believe him, Officer Grant. The name landed like a spotlight. Every head in the room swiveled towards the back row. Grant's heart lurched into his throat. This wasn't the plan. He had meant to wait, to gauge the judge's lean, to speak carefully. Now the choice was ripped from him. Judge Hale raised an eyebrow. Officer Grant, would you care to address the court? Grant rose slowly, his legs heavier than they'd ever felt. He could almost hear Rodriguez's voice in his head. You're getting too involved, Marcus. This will blow up in your face. He could see Officer Walker's patient smile. hear her voice the day she visited him in juvenile detention. You're worth more than one mistake. The room was waiting. The boy was waiting. Your Honor, he began, forcing his voice steady. I've been a police officer for 15 years. I've arrested more juveniles than I can count. Usually, I do my job and move on, but sometimes you see a kid who reminds you why you became an officer in the first place. He glanced at Dante, then back to the bench. This young man has made mistakes, yes, but in the 3 weeks I've visited him, I've seen intelligence, loyalty, and the will to change. What he needs isn't another lockup. What he needs is guidance. The judge leaned forward. And you're prepared to provide that guidance? Grant hesitated. He felt the weight of the courtroom pressing in. If Dante slipped again, if he failed, Grant's name would be dragged down with him. His credibility, his career, it all hung in the balance. He thought of the chess game, of Rosa, the grandmother who still believed, of Dante's shaky hands trying to move upon, asking, "Why are you really here?" "Yes, Your Honor," he said at last, the words anchoring him as they left his mouth. "I am willing to serve as his mentor and be held accountable for his compliance with probation." The gallery erupted in whispers. ADA Mitchell's eyes narrowed. Kim looked like someone had just thrown him into deep water. The judge banged her gavel for silence. "This is highly irregular, Officer Grant. Do you understand that your reputation, perhaps even your career, will hinge on this boy's success or failure?" Grant's throat was dry, but his voice came firm. "I understand, and I accept that risk. What I don't accept is giving up on a 17-year-old who still has a chance." The silence stretched. The judge studied Dante, then Grant, weighing both like scales of justice. Finally, she spoke. "Mr. Williams, I'm granting probation with conditions. Earn your GED in 18 months, complete 200 hours of community service, and meet weekly with Officer Grant. Fail once, and the next time you face the maximum sentence." The gavel struck. The sound echoed off the walls, final and absolute. The courtroom stirred, people gathering papers, murmuring, shuffling. But Grant stayed still, watching Dante. For the first time since their paths had crossed, the boy's expression carried something unfamiliar. Hope. Fragile, trembling hope. Grant exhaled, but relief didn't come. The decision had been made, but the hard part hadn't even begun, because now, Dante wasn't just a kid in the system, it was his responsibility. And if the boy stumbled, it wouldn't just be Dante's future that fell, it would be Grant's too. The first month of probation felt less like court orders and more like unspoken tests. Twice a week at the community center near Dante's grandmother's apartment, Marcus Grant and Dante Williams met at a scoff table. On paper, it was tutoring and check-ins. In truth, every moment was a negotiation. Trust versus suspicion, hope versus resignation. One Tuesday afternoon, Dante dropped his pencil so hard it clattered to the floor. "I'm not college material, Marcus. Let's stop pretending." He folded his arms, leaning back in the chair like he'd won an argument. The words hung in the air like a dare. Grant didn't pick the pencil up right away. He just looked at Dante, his silence stretching long enough to force the boy to fidget. Hook him here or lose him, Grant thought. Finally, he leaned forward. "Funny thing is, I used to tell myself the same line. And you know what I learned? It wasn't true then, and it's not true now." Dante tried to mask his discomfort with a scoff, but for the first time, the fight in his posture softened. The wins were messy. Acing math one night, skipping school the next, finishing a food bank shift, then clashing with a volunteer. But Grant refused to measure progress by perfection. He measured it by return. How quickly Dante came back after falling off track. Still, the real test came on a night Grant never forgot. It was 2:13 a.m. when his phone rang. Rosa Williams' voice broke through the static, panicked and trembling. Marcus, he's gone. His friends came by, bad boys, guns. Please, please find him. Grant drove straight to Dante's block. Outside a convenience store, he found him hooded up, flanked by Rico and Tyler, both with the rap sheets longer than his probation. Dante! Grant's voice cut through the night as he stepped out of the car. Rico smirked, swaggering forward. This is your babysitter, D? He got you on a leash? Grant's hand hovered near his belt, not for his gun, but to remind Rico he wasn't just a mentor, he was still a cop. Not a leash, he said evenly. A lifeline, and right now, Dante's about to cut it. The tension spiked. For a breathless moment, it looked like Dante would turn away from him, fall back into the shadows where Rico waited. Grant's stomach dropped. This is it. He lost him. But then slowly, Dante stepped out of the circle of the streetlight and towards Grant's car. I'm out, he said. Quiet, final. For a second, even Grant wasn't sure which way Dante would turn. On the drive back, silence filled the car. Dante finally broke it. You know what $5,000 means to my grandma? She could pay off bills, get her meds, fix the roof, all in one night. Grant tightened his grip on the wheel. And what would it cost her if you got locked up? You think the money matters if she loses you? Dante pressed his forehead against the glass, watching dark houses blur past. Why'd you come looking for me? You could have just let me screw up, checked a box and been done. Grant slowed as Rosa's porch light came into view, glowing like a beacon in the night. Because that's not what mentors do. Someone believed in me when I didn't deserve it. Now it's my turn. After that night, Dante changed. Not perfect, but different. He came early to tutoring, asked for help, and at the food bank worked past his hours, stacking crates until sweat ran down his back. One Wednesday evening, mid-homework, Dante set his book down. Marcus, you think I could be a cop someday? The question stopped Grant cold. A beat of silence stretched. This was the cliffhanger, the boy who once sneered at school, now daring to imagine a future in uniform. Grant met his eyes. Why do you ask? Because of what you did for me, what Officer Walker did for you. Maybe I could be that for someone else. Grant leaned back, studying him. Not the sullen kids in handcuffs, but a young man at the edge of possibility. Being a cop means pressure, split-second decisions. People are counting on you at their worst. I know, Dante said quickly, but do you think I could do it? Grant smiled faintly. I think you can do anything you're willing to fight for, but first, you've got to finish high school. The years ahead weren't easy, but different. Dante leaned toward light, not shadows. His college essay was about second chances, about the night he almost lost it all, when the acceptance letter for criminal justice arrived with a scholarship. Grant nearly broke down. What stayed with him wasn't the diploma or handshake, but Rosa clutching it to her chest, tears streaming as she whispered, Gracias, Dios, gracias. Grant knew this wasn't the end. College would bring new tests, old temptations, and scars that lingered. But for the first time, Dante believed he had a future worth fighting for, because someone refused to walk away. Because redemption, when chosen, can rise higher than failure ever sank. 5 years after his release, Dante Williams returned to the Juvenile Detention Center, not as an inmate, but as a mentor. Officer Marcus Grant watched from behind the observation window, struck by how different Dante looked now. No longer the skinny teenager in a hoodie. He carried himself with quiet authority, the kind that came from surviving your own battles. Around the table sat 3 kids who could have been mirror images of Dante years ago. Maria, Kevin, and James. Suspicious eyes, defensive smirks, shoulders braced like armor. Dante opened with a question they didn't expect. So, why do you think I'm here? Because we got caught? Kevin shot back, smirking. Wrong, Dante said, leaning forward. I'm here because 8 years ago I was you, handcuffed, angry, convinced life was already over. The room shifted. For the first time, the teens actually listened. Dante didn't sugarcoat his story. He told them about his mother's overdose, about skipping school, about stealing for the thrill of it. He admitted the fights, the suspensions, the nights when he almost went all in with gangs. But here's what changed, Dante said, his voice steady. An officer who arrested me refused to let me believe I was just a case number. He showed up when he didn't have to. He taught me chess. He made me do my homework. He told me it wasn't the worst thing I'd ever done. That saved my life. Maria leaned in. So, how did you actually turn it around? Dante let the silence stretch, a small cliffhanger in itself. Not in one night. I messed up more times than I can count. But every time I fell, he reminded me I could stand up again. And one day, I started to believe. From the window, Grant felt pride tighten his chest. Years earlier, he had been the voice telling a bitter 17-year-old boy that he mattered. Now Dante was that voice for a new generation. After the session, Dante joined him in the hall. The same gray corridors where they'd once walked in silence now felt transformed. You think they heard me? Dante asked quietly. Grant studied him. They didn't just hear you, they saw themselves in you. That's something no lecture could do. Months later, Grant got a call that confirmed it. James, the shoplifter, had asked the court to assign Dante as his mentor. When Dante told Grant, his voice trembled with nerves. What if I screw it up? What if I'm not enough? Grant didn't hesitate. You'll make mistakes, I did it with you. But here's the truth. You'll reach him in ways I never could, because you've been where he is. That became Dante's twist. Discovering mentorship wasn't just about saving someone else. It forced him to wrestle with his own scars in real time. James wasn't easy. He skipped meetings, mounted off, slipped back into shoplifting. The breaking point came one night when he was caught stealing food again. Instead of giving up, Dante drove him across the city until sunrise, hitting 3 food banks, filling grocery bags, and teaching him resources he never knew existed. When James finally confessed, I was just hungry. We didn't have food at home. Something in Dante broke open. By the time Dante entered the police academy, James had earned his GED and was volunteering at a food bank himself. The cycle had begun again. At graduation, Rosa sat in the front row, beaming, Grant in uniform at her side, James cheering with his mother, and even Maria and Kevin waving handmade signs. After the ceremony, Dante handed Grant a small box. Inside was a chess set, engraved, for teaching me that every game can be won, no matter the opening. Thank you for believing in checkmate when I only saw check. Grant's throat tightened. You know what I've learned from you, Dante? What's that? That the most important arrest I ever made wasn't about handcuffs. It was about refusing to let you believe your life was already over. And so, the story came full circle. A boy once written off as a lost cause now wore the badge. And in rooms just like that one, with kids just like he had been, Dante proved something bigger than survival. He proved redemption could ripple outward, one life at a time. Because sometimes the bravest act of policing isn't locking someone up, it's unlocking the belief that they're worth saving. Everyday heroes are all around us.